Good morning. Good morning. All right, so before we get started, I have a confession to make, which is that my New Jersey geography is very, very embarrassing and very bad. So can someone just explain to me, like, where we are right now is called what?
Bergen County.
It's North Jersey.
North Jersey.
This is
Okay, so how is where we are now related to Teaneck?
It's 15 minutes.
Same county.
It's only
Okay.
3 miles away.
It's
Gotcha.
just that this neighborhood is in between lots of streets. You're not directly close to the highway.
Okay, I feel more educated now.
Right, so
Okay, got it. Thank you. Now I know where I am, sort of. All right, so it's great to be here. Thank you, Julie, for having me. When I met Julie, it was like we fell in love with each other. I'm sure those of you who know Julie understand what I mean. Like, you meet her and you love her. So, and we did talk a lot about me coming out here, and Tracy's like my cheerleader on Facebook. So for those of you who are on Facebook, come find me. I'm very active. I have a lot to talk about. And it's been a great journey. Julie and I sort of watched the JWRP grow up, and it's truly, truly an exciting organization to be a part of. I'm very honored to be a trip leader on the upcoming trip in July, and it is great to be here with all of you. So the class that I'm about to give, which is called The Secret of Marriage, is a class that I'm going to be giving in Israel in July, so you guys get a sneak preview. Okay, you guys are lucky. So to start out, how many people here are moms? Raise your hand if you're a mom. Happy Mother's Day!
Thanks, you too.
Thank you, thank you. Thank God. We have 7 kids. The oldest is 21 and my baby is 5. Girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. Yes, I'm very organized. So happy Mother's Day, and actually that's going to be our point of entry for our topic for today. Imagine if you had a big bowl and a cup in the bowl, okay? And you want to fill them both up with water. What would be the most efficient way to do that?
pour it into the cup.
Pour the water into the cup, and then what would happen? The water would overflow into the bowl. Would they both get full? Yes. Would they both get full from one faucet? Yes. What would happen if you would put the cup in the bowl and you would just fill up the bowl?
Depends how much you put in.
If the cup was like this and the bowl was like this, would the cup ever get full?
No, it would overflow.
The cup would not get full. So, the bowl is your parenting. The cup is your marriage. If you fill up your marriage and you fill it up and you fill it up and you fill it up, it will overflow into your bowl, which is your children, and your children will get filled up from the fullness of your marriage. But if you just fill up the bowl, you can fill it up and fill it up and fill it up, but unless you are consciously filling up the cup will never get full. Now, I'm sort of happy that I'm talking to a group that is predominantly women. I said predominantly.
You're never going to forget me.
No. And the reason for that is this is a mistake that moms more than dads typically make. Mothers, and don't get me wrong, happy Mother's Day. Being a mom is awesome. It fills us with the greatest joy and the greatest aggravation, right? We think about our kids all the time, but we do tend to make the mistake of filling up the bowl and not filling up the cup. You have never heard a child say, "My parents were so busy working on their marriage that they never had time for me." But you have definitely heard a man or a woman say, "My spouse was so busy prioritizing the kids all the time that they forgot to nurture the marriage." That's what we're going to talk about today. Got it? Here's what we're going to do. Here's the map of where we're going today. We're going to present a problem. We're going to present a solution that is a false solution, meaning the solution that most people think is the solution, why it doesn't work. Then we're going to present the real solution. Then we are going to discuss 3 practical ways to implement the real solution, and we're going to end with a story. Got it? Problem, false solution, real solution, practical tips, story. Ready? Let's go. Here's the problem, okay? If I were to ask you, the spouse who says, "My spouse is so busy paying attention to the kids all the time that he or she never has time for me, and you ask that spouse, please describe, how would you describe the problem that you are experiencing in your marriage, right? What kinds of sentences might that person say? I feel what? Neglected.
Left out.
Left out. Ignored. I feel that there is, what else? Give me more descriptions. Disconnect.
Second fiddle.
Second fiddle. Lack of communication. Thank you. Doubt. And therefore, there are some marriages that fall apart, whether the couple actually splits up or not. There are marriages that are failing because of these feelings, because of feelings of disconnect, of feeling ignored, neglected, a feeling that what's important to you is being given second priority, or maybe the other person doesn't even really know what's important to you, right? And then here's the other issue, is that we have other relationships in our lives, which seem to be much less stressful, right? Give me an example.
Friends.
Girlfriends, thank you. Girlfriends get you. Girlfriends understand you. Girlfriends laugh at your jokes. You think your girlfriend's jokes are funny, right? When you say to your girlfriend, so what do you think? Should I wear this or this? What does your girlfriend know to say?
This.
She knows how to talk to you about that stuff, right? When you ask your husband, what should I wear? This or this?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't care. You decide, right? Somehow, our spousal relationships seem to be fraught with stress and confusion and conflict, and they seem so high maintenance. And there are other relationships that are so much easier and less complicated that we tend to bring our real stuff to the relationships that are easier, and we leave our spouses out in the lurch, and that's what creates schisms, disconnects, and distance. Everyone understand the problem? Do you agree that the problem exists? In what percent of marriages do you think this problem exists?
99. 50%. Everyone except yours.
I like your honesty, although it's not true. Who said 99? I think it's higher. 100% of marriages have this problem. Now, the degree of the problem, the intensity of the problem, the frequency of the problem is going to differ. But these rough spots, these emotions exist in 100% of marriages, and you're soon going to see why. Okay, are we clear on the problem? Good. Let's discuss the wrong solution, okay? Let's say that a couple is experiencing difficulty or tension in a relationship, right? And they're emotionally astute and emotionally healthy and maritally responsible. So
Don't leave.
Bye-bye.
That's what we're talking about.
They left before they really got fried. All right, so what will a couple do if one or both of them understands that there are difficulties in the marriage? What would be their responsible step to take? Go for help. Good. What kind of help?
Counseling.
I thought you were going to say vodka. Okay. Marriage counseling. What will happen? Is anybody here a marriage therapist? Good. What will typically happen in, not that you need to know from your own experience, I'm just saying based on the movies we've seen and stuff like that, what would typically happen in a therapy session? The couple will sit down, the marriage therapist is here, and what happens in that room? The wife does all the talking and the man is quiet. Does the man want to be there?
No.
Who made the appointment?
The wife.
Thank you. So, not always, but most of the time. What does the wife spend most of her time talking about?
The children.
Or being ignored by her husband. Or that he doesn't understand.
How bad he is.
In other words,
Terrible.
the woman spends most of the time talking about the problem. Exactly. And then what will the marriage therapist do?
Give you homework.
Give you homework, ask you questions. The marriage therapist will troubleshoot about the problem and figure out ways, right, because the marriage session is supposed to facilitate communication. Now the wife has a safe space to communicate to the husband all of the things that have been bothering her, right? And the husband is forced to listen and pay for it. Now, this is what is called the communication myth. There is a great marriage guru out there. His name is Mort Fertel. Look him up. He has this program called marriagemax.com. He's amazing. I once met him personally, and I was really, really impressed by his stuff. He has this theory that this is called the communication myth. Now, let me explain to you what the communication myth is. The communication myth is this. In a strained relationship, the idea that talking about the problem will help solve it is a huge mistake. I'll repeat that. The communication myth says that in a difficult or strained relationship, and by the way, this is not only true of marriages, but it's mostly true of marriages because people think this is the solution. The idea that talking about the problems will help solve them is a huge mistake. And let me tell you why. It was one Friday afternoon, and my family was getting ready for Shabbat, okay? So we all take like showers and baths before Shabbat, and it's Friday afternoon, and there's a lot of us in my house. So what happens is we start to run out of hot water. Okay, so I send my 9-year-old kid. Does anyone here have a 9-year-old?
We had.
Right? We all had 9-year-olds. Did everyone here at one point have a 9-year-old?
Yes.
So here's what 9-year-old boys do. Like 50% of the time, nobody is allowed to see them naked, right? The doors are locked, it's private. The other half of the time, they're running around the house naked. Like, I don't know. You're supposed to figure out what day it is today, okay? So anyway, he went upstairs to take a shower, and 5 minutes later, he's downstairs like, totally unclothed. So like, oh, it's one of those kinds of days. Hi, what's up? So he says to me, the water in the shower is cold. So I said, okay, so where are you going? He said, well, I'm going to your shower. So I'm standing there with him in the middle of the house. He's naked, and we're having this conversation about boilers. So I'm like, well, let me explain to you how the plumbing works in a house. There's something in the basement called a boiler, and the boiler makes the water hot. And then that boiler that water goes into pipes, and the pipes carries that same water all over the house. So if the water is cold, it will be cold in the upstairs shower, it will be cold in the downstairs shower, it will be cold everywhere. He looks at me, totally, he's like, got it. What should I do? So, well, you have to wait until the water cooks up again and it gets hot. Okay, call me when it's hot. Runs upstairs to his room to read his comic books. What did he not understand? The shower doesn't magically create its own hot water, right? It all comes from the same boiler. So too, communication is pipes. It just carries the water. The water, the source of the water, the boiler, that is the root of the relationship. If the relationship is bad, if the boiler is faulty, the water will be cold. Changing your communication is just changing the pipes. You can't fix your boiler by changing your pipes. If the water is not good, if the water is dirty, if the feelings are bad, if the relationships are bad, all communication will do is make it easier for you to hear all the bad feelings. If a couple is having a bad relationship, the last thing they want to do is improve their communication, because it will be that much more frequent, that much more easy, that much more accessible for them to tell each other how bad they feel. And they will be spending more and more and more time talking about problems and talking about bad feelings and talking about stressful things. And if anybody here has ever experienced something difficult in a relationship, and the statistics are over the top for families that are experiencing a trauma, a loss, a special needs child, how badly that will impact on the relationship. And one of the reasons is that every time the couple gets together, they talk about the problem. Because they're bursting. It's a problem. It weighs on them. So every time they see each other, they talk about the problem. It could be a health issue. It could be a financial stress. It doesn't matter what it is. And their entire relationship becomes about the problem. That's terrible on a marriage. We don't want any relationship to be all about problems and stress. So fixing our communications is just fixing the pipes, but keeping the same dirty water flowing through those beautiful, new, amazing pipes. You will get more dirty water. Everyone understand why this is not the solution?
Yeah.
It seems so simple, but most people still think that this is going to fix the problem. Okay, so we've described the problem. We've described the false solution. Well, then what is the solution? If it's not communication, if it's not talking about our difficulties, our bad feelings, our hurt feelings, our feelings of neglect, our feelings of why we're prioritizing the children over the relationship, why it's so stressful for us, why it's so difficult for us, why we need our spouse to be what they aren't, then what is it? And the answer is found right in the Torah. It's found right at the beginning of the Torah. It's found in the Torah's instructions to the very first couple. Who was the very first couple? Adam and Eve. Now, may I point out that nobody asked Adam and Eve who they want to marry. Okay? They did not have a choice. They did not have J-date. They did not have anything. They didn't have any comps. Okay? They were thrown together and they were told, be fruitful and multiply, right? You know these like reality shows they have now about these arranged marriages? They're so interesting. So you kind of wonder, like, how could a marriage succeed when two people are just put together and told, hey guys, make it work. Here's how. The Torah says this, Al Kain, therefore, Ya'azov ish es aviv ve'imo, a man should leave his father and mother. What a shame the guys just left. V'davak be'ishto, and he shall, does anyone know what that word means? Cling. He shall cling to his wife. Okay, we're going to talk about this word v'davak. What is this verb? What should he do? What is this? And this is true of both members of the couple. Does anyone know what the word devek means? The Hebrew, modern Israeli Hebrew word devek. Glue, right? If you lived in Israel and you were given a school supplies list for your kid, devek would be on there. That's glue. You should glue yourself to your wife. Now, how many of you want your husband glued to you all day long? I mean, let's be honest. That sounds a little overly intense, okay? What does it mean? What does it mean? So have you guys ever used super glue and by mistake it gets on your fingers and then like these two fingers are stuck together for like a week, right? The purpose of super glue is to bond two things together. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about being bonded. You know those friends that you don't see very often, but whenever you see them, the bond is just there? Anybody here have a friend like that? Okay, if you have a friend like that, seriously, send a blessing up to heaven because those friends are priceless. That is the kind of bonding we're talking about here. We're not talking about being glued together physically where you literally follow. I mean, you see these couples sometimes, you know what I mean? My in-laws are like this. They go to Home Depot together and they go to the grocery store together. And then my father-in-law goes to like Las Vegas on business and my mother-in-law will go with him. It's just so cute. But okay, not everybody needs that kind of intensity in terms of proximity. But what it means is that their souls are bonded together. Okay, what does that mean? What the Torah is telling us here is that the purpose of the marital relationship is not to be married and not even necessarily to stay married. Staying married is not always an accomplishment. There are marriages that should not remain intact. A couple can stay married and have a terrible relationship. The purpose is to become bonded. The purpose is to become one. That is why we are told to get married. V'davak bi'ishto. Bond to your spouse. Become one. Now, we could ask ourselves, why is this so important? I mean, marriage seems to be a biologically wise move. You know, you put two people together. They can share a home. They can share expenses. They can even have a joint bank account if they're super close. They can procreate and have children together. There are some emotional benefits of that. There are also some emotional stressors, let's not lie, right? And then the race will continue. There's two parents, so one can theoretically get a job and the other can be the primary caregiver. There are biological benefits to this, right? But that's not the point. That is not the spiritual point of marriage. The spiritual point of being on this planet, and this is taught by a very famous rabbi. His name was Rabbi Dessler. Has anybody here ever heard of him? He was a very famous teacher of Jewish ethics. And he taught that one of the main reasons that God plunked us down on this planet, and it's not just to get into a good preschool so you can get into a good school, so you can get into a good college, so you can get a good job, so that you can have kids and do it all over again. But rather, the purpose is to become a giver. The reason why that's so key is that the Kabbalists explain But the reason God created this universe in the first place was to do acts of kindness. In the Adon Olam prayer, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the words describe, and this is something I talk about in my prayer book, the words describe that God lived in this world totally alone and supreme. He didn't need people, okay? People just complicate the universe. But God wanted a universe that he could give. And while he reigned supreme, there was no one to give to. So God created a universe so that he could give. Now you might ask, it seems like this is fraught with difficulty and sadness and pain, and you look around the world and you see so much of that. That's a great class for another day. But that's what the Kabbalists teach us. And therefore, when God created humans, he said to us, I want you to, it's that same word again, vidavakta bo. You shall cling to God. How do I cling to God? He's not even discernible with the five senses. What that means is that you should bond with God, which means you should emulate God. You should become God-like. You should behave in this universe in a godly fashion. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you look at God's character traits. You should try to imitate them and be more like them. And that's how you bring holiness into this world. So, if God created this whole world to be a giver, it would stand to reason that one of the things we're meant to accomplish here is to likewise be givers. How many of you lived alone on your own single before you got married and had kids? How long did you do that for?
5 years.
5 years. 8 years.
7 years.
7 years. Okay, good. How many times a day, this is a personal question, how many times a day would you say that your capacity to be a giver was stressed out? You were giving so much that you felt stressed out when you were single?
Never.
Never. Okay, now that you have told me that you're all moms, okay, and I know some of you have your kids out of the house, but let's just say when you were actively raising children, how many times a day would you say that your ability to be a giver was taxed and overwhelmed?
10.
It's exponential,
100.
right? So we might think that we're givers, and then we get into a family, and we get into a marriage, and we get into parenting, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, giving overload. What do we give to our kids? What do we give them?
Love and
Everything! Give me some examples.
Rides to the mall.
Rides to the mall.
Help with homework.
Help with homework. Food.
Cooking, shopping.
Shopping for their
Time.
clothes. Yeah.
What?
Shopping for their
Money.
Emotional
Time.
support.
Shopping. What?
Emotional support.
Emotional support. We give them our best years. I remember I had one kid, her name was Hindi. When she was little, she literally ate so much, okay? I called it the Hindi diet. I was on the Hindi diet. Every single thing I made for myself to eat, 50% went to Hindi. I'm like, everybody should be on this diet. This is how you cut your calories in half. You have a kid who eats half your food off your plate, okay? So we give them everything. We give and we give and we give and we don't stop giving, right? That's the point. The reason these relationships are difficult is because they are taxing, they are stretching, they are working out our muscle of being givers. You know how you think you're physically fit until you get to a gym class? Then you're like, oh, I thought I was in shape, but oh my gosh, I'm dying, right? And then at the end of the class, I go to this class at the gym every Tuesday. Every Wednesday, this is what I look like. Okay, and my husband says to me, what is wrong with you? And I'll be like, I went to this amazing class, and now I can't move or breathe. And he's like, yeah, that sounds really amazing. I think you should do that again. And I do it again. You know why? Because it makes me stronger. It makes my muscles stronger. So when we fall into bed at the end of the day and we're exhausted, we've been giving all day, it makes us stronger. We are much, much, much better givers after being in a family than when not being in a family. And yes, it's exhausting. And yes, we can't walk. But we're stronger and we're better people because of it. And that's why we're here. So when we say to ourselves, why is it so important to be bonded in a marriage? Can't we just be co-parents? The answer is no. You can't just be co-parents. You have to bond the relationship. And the only way to bond the relationship is to be a giver. We're gonna get into practical techniques, okay? Everybody understand the concept. If the way to fix the problem is not communication, then the way to fix the problem is to give. And by giving, you will bond. Bond. What did you say?
I said receive.
Receive, that's also true. But the point is, like we said, vidavak. You should glue yourselves together. Again, not physically, emotionally, spiritually. The way you do that, the way you become one is by being a giver. That friend that you feel so connected to, that even when you haven't seen each other in such a long time, you still feel bonded. Hands down, there was a lot of giving that happened in that relationship. However back it was. You were there for them. They were there for you. You were in their wedding. They remembered your birthday. They flew in for your whatever. There's giving. There's connecting. And then that bond can always, that bond is great. That's amazing. But in a marriage, it's not good enough. You can't just pick up where you got left off. You have to keep filling the cup and filling the cup and filling the cup. So now we've established that the way to fix a broken marriage is not by communicating about how broken it is, although there's a time for that. We'll get there. The way to fix it is to bond, to become one spiritually. How do we do that? We do that by becoming givers, okay? We are now going to describe 3 practical ways to do this. Got it? Ready? So the problem is disconnection in marriage, very often occurring by filling up the bowl instead of the cup, by paying so much attention to the kids that we neglect the marriage, although that's not the only reason, but that's a very common one. The full solution is communication. The right solution is bonding through becoming a giver, right? Everyone following? And now we're going to discuss 3 practical ways to do it. Ready? So here's the acronym that you're going to remember of what the 3 ways are. You're going to give your marriage first aid, A-I-D, okay? Ready? A is you are going to ask a question. This is the question you're going to ask yourself. And this, by the way, comes from an amazing book called Choice Theory by Dr. William Glasser. It's a fabulous book. It's a book about how to improve all relationships and about how many of us, and I will insert especially Jewish women, we freak out the people in our relationships because we want everyone in our lives to succeed. So we criticize and we blame and we nag and we do all these things. You don't have to get a guilty look on your face. We've all been there. But that instead, if we want to improve our relationships, you have to, A, ask yourself the following question. Is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? Okay, I'll repeat that. Ask yourself the following question. Is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? Now I'm going to give you an example. Okay? I'm going to give you an example from kids being little because that's where my brain is. So you are getting your kids ready to go to school in the morning and your husband says, oh, hey, I'll drive her to the bus stop. I'll drive our daughter to the bus stop. So you're like, oh, okay, great. So your husband gets the kid ready and he's about to leave the house and you see that her hair is not done the way it's supposed to be done. And it's 30 degrees outside and she's wearing a spring jacket. What do you do? Well, before you took this class, what would you have done? What would most people do in that moment? Freak out and yell at him and say what specifically? Come on, give me the dirt.
How could you let her go out like that?
How could you let her go out like that? Right now, probably if it's the morning, you probably haven't showered yet, and you probably haven't had your coffee yet. Are you in a good mood? No. It's also possible that you're tired. It's also possible that you didn't get enough sleep the night before for whatever thousands of reasons. Jewish mothers don't get enough sleep. Okay? So your defenses are down. Your resources are low. Freak out, yell at your husband. Anything else? Tell your daughter to march upstairs. Good. What else?
Actually, I would have just
Do it
said
yourself.
to the husband, bring an extra jacket, just in case.
Bring an extra jacket just
You're
in
very
case.
good.
That's really nice.
Do it yourself.
I even thought of that.
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Just do it yourself. Okay, good. Let's take the just do it yourself model for a minute, right? Because I think that's like not too nice and not too mean. It's just kind of average, right? Just do it yourself. Now, is what you just did or said going to bring you closer or further apart from your husband? Further apart. Why?
Because he's going to be defensive.
He's going to be defensive. How will he feel? Give me emotions.
He's gonna feel attacked.
Attacked,
Like you can't do anything right.
like he can't do anything, incompetent,
He won't feel good enough. Right, stupid.
right? Right? He won't feel good enough.
Denigrated.
Denigrated.
Why bother next time?
Why bother next time? Exactly. Defeated, discouraged. That creates
Feel like you failed.
exactly like a failure.
Well, he did.
That creates a schism in the bond, okay? It's a chink in the bond. And the mistake that a lot of spouses make, and this is why many people prioritize the kids before the spouse, is because they think the stakes of ignoring my children are high, but the stakes of ignoring my spouse are low. That is a huge mistake. The stakes for ignoring your spouse are very high. Spouses are people. They have emotions. If you did what you did to your husband, to your child, you would feel like a terrible mother all day. But we do it to our spouses all the time because we take that relationship for granted. And then one fine day, there's a big break in the relationship and we can't figure out how it happened. You know how it happened? A bunch of small mistakes. That's how big breaks happen. A bunch of small, repetitive mistakes over and over again. So we need to ask ourselves the question, is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? Don't take the relationship for granted. Saying something nice is enormous. Now what should you say to your husband who's walking out the door with your daughter who looks the way she does? What should you say if you've asked yourself that question first?
Have a good day.
Have a great day. What else?
Thank you for helping me.
Thank you for helping me. What else?
You might wanna slip the life jacket, like in her backpack, just so that, you know, like when maybe he's not looking,
Okay. Okay.
not to say anything.
Okay. Not to
Or
say
smile,
anything.
or
Right.
smile.
Try to solve the problem a different way.
Right,
What
or
about
smile.
thank you so much for all your help? Do you think she could wear this? Not instead.
In addition.
In addition.
She can wear
Do you
two
think
coats
maybe
today.
she could take this along with her? Something that would make him feel good,
Uh-huh.
but still would get you the result. that
Good,
you want.
good. And then even if it wasn't the exact
about
right
the hair.
words, your spouse would recognize that you're
Try.
trying. You know, sometimes our spouses say things to us that are a little clumsy, but we know that they're trying and it's so sweet. We appreciate the effort too, even if it's not perfect.
I was even thinking of sticking like a scrunchie or something or a tie.
Forget the hair.
Right.
More the jacket.
I just worried about my brother's hair, so.
Okay, so we're gonna give first aid, so it's AID. So A was,
Ask questions.
ask yourself the question. What's the question?
Is what I'm about to say
Going to bring us, is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? I'm gonna take questions at the end, okay? So- yeah, just after if you don't mind, okay? Because I just want to develop the idea. I, this is a big one. I is intimacy. Intimacy takes two forms. There's emotional intimacy and there's physical intimacy. I'm not going to talk about physical intimacy today. That's a whole other topic. I'm going to talk about emotional intimacy. This is the mistake that most people make when it comes to intimacy. There are two forces that exist in a relationship: intimacy and efficiency. They are opposites. They are usually mutually exclusive. Now, a relationship needs both of these things, but they must be in the right proportions. And if a couple wants a marriage to be strong, they have to prioritize intimacy over efficiency. Okay? Now I'm going to give you a few examples. So this guy,
can't it be both?
so it can be both and it must be both, but it will not be both at the same. Usually it will not be both at the same time. I'm going to explain. So let's say,
Like, I don't have time for this now, I'm tired, because you're trying to be more.
yes, I'm going to explain. So this guy, Mort Fertel, who has this program called Marriage Max, he describes this scenario where he was out on tour and he was selling some books. And this couple came to his table to choose, and the wife wanted to buy a book. So she's looking through his books and she's, this one, that one. And she says to her husband, I don't know, honey, what do you think? This book looks really interesting, but this book also looks interesting. What do you think? Okay? So what do you think the husband says to her?
Buy both.
Whatever you want, buy both.
I don't care.
I don't care. That's exactly what happened. okay? Now he looks at the wife's face, and the wife is deflated. Why is the wife deflated? What did she want out of that encounter?
I wanted him to be interested in what she was
Yes,
interested in.
she wanted him to be interested in what she was interested in. Because what?
Because I've never lived this.
That is a classic representation of intimacy versus efficiency. She wanted intimacy out of that encounter. She was trying to say, let me invite you into my world. I want you to care about what I care about. I want you to care about this decision. Could she have made the decision by herself?
Yes.
And he was looking at it from a standpoint of efficiency. Let's get to the decision as quickly and efficiently as possible because I have other things I'd like to do right now. That's it. That's intimacy versus efficiency. Okay, here's another example. I have a dishwasher fetish. I'm just gonna put it right out there, okay? I like my dishwasher loaded a certain way, okay? It's a weakness of mine, I'm working on it. All right, any of you with me? Okay, awesome. So I am standing by my sink and I'm loading the dishwasher. Now my husband comes up to me and he starts helping, okay? What does he want out of that encounter?
Efficiency.
What does he want? Why did he come over to help me load the dishwasher? He wants to help me. He's trying to connect with me. You are doing a job and I am going to lighten your load, right? How do I feel because I have a dishwasher
Get out of the
issue?
way.
I'm in efficiency mode. 1 second. I want to load this dishwasher as efficiently as possible. And you are encroaching on my sandbox. Okay, and what I really want is for you to move away from the dishwasher so I can do the job as quickly and efficiently as possible, right? Intimacy versus efficiency. You have to prioritize intimacy first. Let him load the dishwasher. Connect over the dishwasher. Will it get done in exactly the same way? No. Will the right book be bought? Maybe not. Will the daughter have the best hairdo that day? Probably not. But you have to prioritize intimacy over efficiency because that's how bonding happens. And that act, the spouse who really is craving efficiency in that moment, but puts intimacy first, that is a huge expression of being a giver.
Wow.
That's where the bonds happen. Is it a sacrifice? Yes. And you have to ask yourself, am I the kind of person who consistently puts efficiency first? You know what? A lot of us are, because we're juggling a lot of things. We've got families, some of us are working, we've got stuff we're involved in, we can volunteer, we've got family, extended family stuff, we have a lot of things to do, and we want to do them quickly, and we want to do them well, and we want to do them efficiently. And then intimacy can very often take the bottom rung on the ladder. And that is a big mistake. So we have to prioritize intimacy over efficiency. Here's an example that has nothing to do with marriage. My family went to Israel this past winter on a family mission. We took 5 families from our community and we did a bar and bat mitzvah mission. And it was so unbelievable. We were there with a bunch of teenagers and quite honestly, I wasn't so sure how that would work out. It worked out beautifully. Did any of you guys have Patrick on your trips to Israel?
Yes.
Okay, how awesome is Patrick? So he led our trip, and the teenagers fell in love with him, and he was so amazing. And 2 of our kids were with us, our 12-year-old daughter and our 9-year-old son. And it was the most amazing time. It was such great, relaxed, non-stressful time with our kids. And the teenagers just had so much fun with each other that they weren't, annoying. And it was just great. So on the trip, somehow I feel like every time I go to Israel, I get, a certain kind of spiritual perspective about my life that I bring home with me because you're away from your normal responsibilities and stresses, and it just gives me perspective. So I said to myself, my 12-year-old daughter, she's the type of kid who's always asking me to do stuff together. Some kids they don't want to look at you for 5 years. So she's not like that. She wants to always sit on my lap and play games with me and do stuff with me and tell me things it's a lot sometimes, okay? So I've got her, and then I've got kids who won't talk to me.
Oh my God.
Did anybody try to talk? Okay. Did anybody here have teenage boys?
Yeah.
Yes. Have you ever tried this? This is my texting relationship with my teenage son. Okay. I'm upstairs. I'm going to bed. He's downstairs in his man cave, and I'm like, "Hey, sweetie, I'm going to bed now. Good night. Love you." Heart emoji. Heart emoji. Heart emoji. Okay, I get it. That's overload for a 15-year-old boy. I'm just being annoying. I get that. You know what he texts back?
Okay.
GN.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Okay, so I've got both flavors. But in any event, So she's like that. And I said to myself when I was in Israel, when I get home, I can't believe I said this. When I get home, every single time she asks me to play a game, I will say yes. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter how efficient I'm being. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop in the middle of the email. I'm going to stop in the middle of the sink full of dishes. I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing, and I will say yes. And I will play with her. And I am happy to report that for the most part, I have done it. Because I realized that what I was doing was I was prioritizing efficiency over intimacy. And doing that over and over and over again has a huge impact on a relationship. So that is I, intimacy. Okay, so A was ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? I, intimacy must come before efficiency. And finally, D. D stands for do. You know how you build a relationship? By doing things. You know all those problems that we said that you shouldn't talk about so much? How are those problems going to resolve? Because sometimes there really is stuff that you have to talk about, right? How could the solution possibly be just stop talking about it? So what this guy, Mort Fertel, who taught about this communication myth, what he claims, and I think this is so true, is that when you stop talking about the problem, but instead you focus on the quality of the relationship through asking yourself that question, through prioritizing intimacy over efficiency, and finally through doing things together, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, the problems tend to not necessarily resolve, but dissolve. Many of the problems tend to go away by themselves because the problems really stemmed from the relationship being stressed, from each member feeling that the other didn't care about them. But when you ask yourself that question consistently, and when you prioritize intimacy over efficiency, and when you do, actions are so much louder than words, then so many of those problems just dissolve. And the problems that haven't dissolved, the problems that really do need to be resolved, your ability to resolve them via communication will be so much better because you fixed the boiler, you fixed the water, and now the pipelines are going to communicate good, better, positive feelings. So what should you do? Like, instead of talking so much, do. What should you do? Has anybody here read Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages? It's a fabulous book. Everybody should read it. Pretty poorly written, but amazing information. And what he does is he breaks down how every person has a different love language. Some people like to be loved with physical touch. They love hugs and kisses and touching, and that makes them feel foot massages, and that makes them feel really good. Some people like what he calls acts of service, okay? I saw somebody posted on Facebook this morning. My husband gave me the best Mother's Day gift. He cleaned out the garage. If you just thought in your head, aw, then you are an acts of service person. You would rather have your spouse do something for you, fill up your car with gas, finish that do-it-yourself project that's been hanging around. Take your kid out to buy boots for the winter as opposed to flowers. Yes?
Yes.
Any of you in that squarely in that category?
Yes.
Okay. There's another love language, and that's called words of affirmation. These are the people who like to hear, I love you, I appreciate you, you look beautiful. That's their love language, words of affirmation, right? There are more. The point is that most people think that they should love other people the way that they like to be loved. If I like a lot of hugs, I'm going to give out a lot of hugs. If I like the garage to be cleaned out, I'm going to clean out the garage. If I like flowers, I'm going to give flowers. If I like gifts, I'm going to give gifts. If I like words of affirmation, I'm going to give words of affirmation. Let's go back to our teenage sons for a minute. I like to be told I love you, I appreciate you, I value you. You know how it makes my teenage son feel? Like that. It's too much. I have to love him the way he wants to be loved. So if the third one is do. What should you do? Find out what your spouse's love language is. How do they want to be loved? And if you don't know, ask them. Imagine if your spouse asked you today, how would you like to be loved today? Oh my gosh, wouldn't you feel amazing? Right? And then you would know, I'm sure you would know what to say. I'm sure you have an answer at the tip of your tongue, right? How many of you know how you would answer that question? How would you like to be loved today? Nobody? You don't have to tell me, but I'm just saying, how many of you know what the answer would be? Okay. So if you want to know what to do, ask your spouse, what is it? And you probably even know. You probably even know. When you're loving your spouse the wrong way, you probably know that you're loving your spouse the wrong way, right? Does your spouse want to be told? I tell I'm not saying me, people love their spouse by telling them to lose weight because they love them, because they want them to be healthy, because they want them to live till 120 years. Is that how your spouse wants to be loved? No. I'm going to take questions at the end. Questions and comments. So A, ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? I, intimacy, emotional intimacy. It must come before efficiency. And D, do. Do the things that you know makes your spouse feel loved. I'm going to end with a story, and then I'm going to take questions and comments. I read a beautiful story by Ralph Paul Evans on the Huffington Post. Now, Ralph Paul Evans is an accomplished author. In fact, he's written many romance novels. And he wrote an article called How I Saved My Marriage. And here's what happened. He found that he married his wife, her name was Carrie, and they felt like they were kind of different, but they could make their marriage work. And over time, they began to feel more and more disconnected. And ironically, he found that when he started becoming successful in his career, and he started making money and like arriving, their relationship became more and more and more strained. And one time he was away on book tour, and they had argued before he left. And he was in his hotel room, and he called her to say goodnight, and they had this huge argument. And he felt so overwhelmed with despair that he literally lost it. And he says, I'm not the type of person who prays, but that moment I decided to pray. And he was alone in this hotel room in Atlanta, Georgia, and he starts crying and praying. And he says to God, I don't know what happened to our marriage, and I don't know how to fix it, but I need you to send me some kind of inspiration, because I don't want to become a statistic. He continued to pray that whole night. He continued to pray the whole way home. And he gets this flash, and he knows what to do. The next morning, he wakes up, and he says to his wife, how can I be a better husband to you today? And she looks at him with disgust. And she says, now you're asking me how you can be a better husband? What about this, and what about that, and what about all these years, and what about all these things I've been telling you? And he said, nothing. And he said, I know. But today, I want to know, how can I be a better husband to you today? She wouldn't answer him. The next morning, he woke up again. And he said, how can I be a better husband to you today? And she says, you want to know how? Clean up the garage. And he knew that was a blow, because it was a huge, huge project. She was baiting him. You know what he said? Nothing. And he went and he cleaned up the garage. The next morning, he woke up, and he said to her, how can I be a better husband to you today? And she said, you want to know how? Clean up the kitchen. The kitchen was messy from the night before, dinner, dishes, you name it. You know what he said? Nothing. And he went downstairs and he cleaned up the kitchen. And he did this every single day. On the 10th day, she broke down crying. And she said, why do you keep asking me this? It's not your fault, it's my fault. I haven't been the wife to you that I should be. Why do you keep asking me how you could be a better husband today? I feel terrible, I feel disgusting. I should be asking you how I could be a better wife to you. And he says to her, you're right, but that's not what's on me right now. What's on me right now is to ask you, how can I be a better husband to you today? Because I care about our marriage. And she said to him, what I would really like from you today is for us to go for a walk together. And he said, you got it. And they went for a walk together, and they slowly rebuilt their marriage. Not by talking about their problems, but by building intimacy, by connecting, by doing the things for each other that they took the time to find out what their spouse wanted, by asking themselves, is what I'm about to say or do going to bring us closer or further apart? That's how we bond. That's how we become givers. Because trust me, what he did was a huge gift. It was a huge act of giving. And every single person can do this. Every single person can fix this. It's the small acts, just like it's the small acts over and over and over again that destroy a relationship. It's the small positive acts over and over and over again that build a relationship. And hopefully with these tools, every single one of us can continue, because like I said, these issues exist in 100% of marriages. We just want to reduce them so they're a tiny blip in an otherwise beautiful relationship of giving, of connecting, of bonding that will last for a very, very long time. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think you were first.
You're building them up.
Yeah.
You're helping your daughter and you solve those
Mhm.
problems in one day.
Yep.
That's what
Julie.
Okay. Oh, the 5 languages of love. There's a quiz in the back. So if you don't know your love language or you
Okay.
don't know the spouse's, you just take the quiz and then you can figure it out.
So the next time you guys do date night, because that's really, really intimate, not necessarily efficient, you should take that quiz together. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, so much a part of our responsibility as a mother is sort of taking care of everyone's needs, not only their emotional need to feel loved, but like their health and their other things. So, you know, I'll use my family as an example. My husband's a diabetic, spends his day eating cake and candy. And one of the stressors in our relationship is I'm constantly on him about his health because I love him and want him to be healthier. How do I do that in a positive way that is not nagging him, but rather building a relationship?
Okay, that's a great question. The answer is this. Your husband is the only human being who is going to take responsibility for his health. No nagging, as you have seen, is going to change him. Right? Is what you've been doing so far working?
No.
Right. So in other words, what you are putting forth is giving you the result of a stressor in your marriage without giving you the result of better health. Right?
Mhm.
So therefore, it would seem to me that you should stop doing it, cold turkey, preferably, so that you get your marriage back the way you want it to be. And his health, that's an outside question that you're going to have to think about. But this particular, whether it was stressing your relationship or not, but especially because it is, if you keep doing the same thing and it's not working, you should stop. And you have to figure out another way. But you cannot make people change. They have to want to change themselves. And I think that what you're referencing is really a much broader question than your own specific issues in your marriage, is that we try to change our spouses.
And our
we try-
children.
And our children, yes. Totally agree. And it stresses that relationship too, right? And we do it because we love them. But in our love for them, we're killing the intimacy in the relationship. Because we're setting ourselves up as a nudge and a nag, and quite frankly, as a person to be avoided. And that's the last thing in the world that we want.
Yeah, but then you feel like if you're not saying something, then you're not showing
Well,
love.
what about an
Right?
outside person?
So you
Yeah.
would
What
ask
about
your spouse,
involving an outside
when I
person?
nudge you about your health, does it make you feel more loved? Because that's why I do it. I do it because I love you. Does it make you feel more loved or less loved? And really listen to his answer.
And when it's your child who hasn't done their homework, or your, you know, like those kind of things where,
That's easy. It's on them.
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
It's easier
We have to
because
learn to
with a
let it
health
go.
issue, you feel like you want the person you love to live for 120 years. And you feel like this huge degree of responsibility. You know, I had a different example where my husband and one of my kids had a very stressed out relationship. And I felt like I was uniquely suited to make them get along because I'm, I don't know, some kind of fairy. So I thought that if I, and this is something a lot of women do, if I positioned myself in the middle, I would tell my husband what he should do. I would tell my kid what to do, right? Then I could fix everything and solve everything. You know what I accomplished? Both of them resented my intrusion. And you know what happened to their relationship? It didn't get any better. So you know what I did? I stopped. Is the relationship any better? No. That hasn't changed. And I don't really have an answer to how that can change because I can't change other people. They can only change themselves. And counterintuitively, the more you unconditionally love the people in your life without trying to fix and change them, the more likely it will be that they will want to fix and change themselves.
Could you address that a little deeper? Because thank God I'm blessed with really a wonderful husband, but I'm surrounded with some close friends who give and give and give. And the husband hasn't quite gotten there yet. And at what point do you
Okay,
decide
that's a
you
good
wanna
question.
keep on giving and
So-
you're not making impact?
Okay, so let's talk about two emotionally healthy people who are married to each other, okay? Because sometimes you have a person who's married to a not emotionally healthy person, and that person will be a giver and be a giver and be a giver, and nothing positive will happen. Because the person that they're giving to could be an addict, could be have borderline personality disorder, suffer from anxiety or depression, be an abuser. There's so many reasons why a giver will lose. So I am not going to address emotionally unhealthy people because the rules change when it comes to dealing with emotionally unhealthy people. But in a relationship, which is the vast majority of the time, where both people are emotionally healthy, where both spouses want to have a good relationship, one person gives, and generally speaking, it might take time, but the other person will respond in kind. If somebody is married to somebody who's not emotionally healthy, and again, that is not the majority of cases, that person needs professional help to figure out what to do with that relationship. Because sometimes those people think that if I give more, I'll get more, and that's a very unhealthy situation. So that is the first question that has to be established. Is the person I'm dealing with emotionally healthy or unhealthy? And outside professional help should be access to make that determination because we are biased. We don't always have. Sometimes we think we're dealing with an emotionally unhealthy person and we're not, and it could take years for a person to realize that they're in a relationship with an emotionally unhealthy person, or the opposite may be true. They could think the person is emotionally unhealthy and maybe it's them who's emotionally unhealthy. So that kind of clarity is really hard to arrive at by yourself. Okay, any other thoughts or questions?
What was the name? It was Marriage Max? Is
Yeah,
that
Word Fertel is his name.
Fertel?
Fertel
And the 5 love languages?
is Dr. Gary Chapman, Chapman. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. It was wonderful to meet you all. Thank you,
You have
Julie.
your books here.
My books are right here. I wrote a book on prayer.